The fluorescent lights of Ward 7 buzzed at exactly the same pitch they always did. Low, steady, indifferent. At 11:47 p.m., Colonel Douglas Hargrove stood in the hallway of Bethesda Military Medical Center with his arms crossed and his jaw set like he was preparing for a briefing rather than standing in a hospital corridor. He was 61 years old, 2 combat tours in Fallujah, 1 in Kandahar, and 32 years of service that had shaped his spine into something closer to iron than bone. He did not believe in surprises. He did not believe in uncertainty. And he absolutely did not believe in the small, quiet woman mopping the hallway 20 feet in front of him. She was maybe 5'4", brown hair pulled through the back of a faded army volleyball cap, worn green scrubs, the kind the hospital gave volunteers, not staff. She moved slowly, methodically, the mop going side to side in even strokes, her eyes on the floor. Colonel Hargrove had spent 3 decades reading men. He could tell within seconds of meeting a soldier whether they had what it took, whether they'd hold their position under fire or fold, whether they were the kind of person you wanted beside you when everything went wrong. He looked at this woman and made his assessment in less time than it took to blink. Nobody, a volunteer, invisible. What Colonel Hargrove did not know, could not have known, was that the woman with the mop had a file so classified that only 11 people in the United States government had full access to it. He didn't know she had survived things that would have ended most men. He didn't know that in the previous decade, she had been inside more hostile environments than he had, and had walked out of all of them. He didn't know any of that. He just knew he had a problem on the other side of that hallway door, and he had exactly 45 minutes to make it disappear before his career ended. He started walking toward room 714. She kept mopping, and the night, the longest night in Bethesda Military Medical Center's 40-year history, had only just begun. Before we go any further, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens in this hospital over the next 70 minutes is unlike anything I've covered before. A woman who looks like she belongs nowhere near combat. A colonel with enough connections to make problems vanish. A ward full of patients who have no idea that the person cleaning their floors is the only thing standing between them and a very bad night. Drop a comment right now telling me what city you're watching from, and stay until the very end, because the moment this woman's file gets opened, nothing in this story is what you thought it was. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Her name was Maya Cole, 38 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, 131 pounds on a good day, which this was not. She had brown eyes that people described, when they described them at all, as calm. Not warm, not cold. Calm. The way deep water is calm. The kind of stillness that has nothing to do with emptiness and everything to do with depth. She had been at Bethesda Military Medical Center for 11 weeks, working 6 days a week as a volunteer aide in the long-term care wards. She showed up at 7 in the morning, left at 7 in the evening, and never asked for anything except the schedule for the following day. The permanent staff liked her. She was quiet, efficient, good with the difficult patients. The ones who woke up screaming or couldn't remember where they were. She had a way of sitting with them through the worst of it without flinching, without offering empty comfort, without saying anything at all most of the time. Just present, just steady. The nurses had started calling her the anchor. She never corrected them. She never told them anything much about herself at all. If you asked Maya Cole where she was from, she would say Virginia. If you asked what she did before volunteering, she would say she had worked in logistics. If you pressed, and most people didn't, because there was something about her that made you feel pressing was both unnecessary and slightly unwise. She would say she had served in the military for 12 years and had been medically separated about 4 years ago. All of that was technically true. None of it came close to the whole story. The whole story started with a man named Frank Cole, her father, who was a chief warrant officer in the Army's 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and who had, from the time Maya was 7 years old, treated his daughter's education and self-reliance with the same seriousness he brought to everything else. He taught her to read terrain before she could read maps. He taught her to control her breathing before she understood what adrenaline was. He taught her judo, Krav Maga, and later Brazilian jiu-jitsu in their garage in Fayetteville, North Carolina, every weekend for 11 years, until she was better than he was, and they both knew it. "You're small, Maya," he told her once, when she was about 14 and frustrated after sparring with a boy twice her size at a tournament. She had won, but it had taken longer than it should have. "And you will always be small. That's not a problem you solve. That's a variable you account for." What's the difference? He had looked at her with those gray eyes that never seemed to be entirely in the present moment. A problem you try to fix, a variable you use. She had thought about that for a long time. She was still thinking about it. Maya had enlisted at 18 and been assigned to the 82nd Airborne, where her fitness scores and tactical evaluations attracted attention quickly. By 22, she had been selected for a special program, one that, at the time, was not officially acknowledged to exist, training female soldiers for specialized operations in environments where male operators couldn't go. By 25, she had done things in 3 different countries that would never appear in any report accessible to anyone without a clearance level she probably didn't need to name. Her specialty was close-quarters combat. Not the kind you see in movies. Clean, choreographed, over in seconds with the good guys standing tall and the bad guys arranged neatly on the floor. Real close-quarters combat in tight spaces, low light, high noise, with multiple threats and incomplete information, and the absolute requirement that you do not stop thinking even when your body is in crisis. She was, and this is not an exaggeration, it is in her classified file in black ink, one of the most capable close-quarters fighters the program had ever produced. Her instructors called her the architect, because she didn't just fight. She designed the fight before it started. She read a room when she walked into it. She knew where the threats would come from before they came. She knew how to move through a space in a way that maximized her advantages and eliminated the other sides. And she could do it with her hands, with whatever was nearby, or with nothing at all. She left the program 4 years ago, not because she was forced out, because she made a choice. The choice had a name, Private First Class Jacob Reyes, 23 years old, from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He had been a member of her team. He had died in a stairwell in a city she was not allowed to name, in a country she was not allowed to specify, in an operation that officially never happened. She had held him while he went. She had carried him out. 6 weeks later, she submitted her separation paperwork. She did not explain why. She did not have to. The people who knew her understood without being told. She had spent the 4 years since doing 3 things. Physical training, because some habits are too deep to extract. Reading, because her mind needed somewhere to go. And volunteering at military hospitals, because there was nowhere else she wanted to be. She wasn't hiding. She was just very, very quiet. That had been enough until tonight. Colonel Douglas Hargrove was not a bad man. This is important to say plainly, because the easiest thing in the world is to make the villain of a story a monster. And Colonel Hargrove was not a monster. He was a man who had been excellent at an extremely difficult job for a very long time, and who had, somewhere in the last decade, confused being excellent at his job with being right about everything. He had joined the Army at 19, served in the Gulf War as a young lieutenant, and had built a reputation in the years that followed as a tactical mind of genuine quality. His soldiers respected him. His peers respected him. His superiors trusted him with things they didn't trust to everyone. He was not corrupt in the ordinary sense. He did not take money. He did not trade favors for personal gain. What he did was something more complicated. He had learned, over 32 years, how to make inconvenient things become convenient, how to route problems into dead ends, how to manage the narrative around events that, if examined too closely, might reflect poorly on the institution he had given his life to. He told himself this was loyalty, and in some ways it was. But loyalty can be a cover for things that have no better name. What Colonel Hargrove was doing in Bethesda Military Medical Center on this particular night had to do with a soldier named PFC Danny Webb, who was lying in room 714 with 3 broken ribs, a fractured orbital socket, and a testimony that, if heard by the right people, would end the careers of 4 officers, including one who happened to be Hargrove's oldest friend. Webb had witnessed something in Kandahar 3 months ago, something that had been logged, reported, and subsequently, very quietly, buried. Webb had not understood that the burial was supposed to be permanent. He had filed a secondary report, then a third. Then he had made the mistake of sending a copy to a JAG officer he trusted. The JAG officer had forwarded it up the chain. The chain had reached Colonel Hargrove. And now Hargrove was standing in this hospital corridor at 11:47 p.m., having driven here personally rather than making phone calls, which tells you everything you need to know about how seriously he was taking this. He was not here to hurt Danny Webb. He was here to convince Danny Webb, strongly, clearly, with the full weight of his rank and 32 years of service behind every word, that the report he had filed was based on a misunderstanding, and that recanting it would be the wisest decision he ever made. He had done this before. It had always worked before. He was not expecting any complications. The woman mopping the hallway barely registered to him. That was his first mistake. Ward 7 at Bethesda was the long-term recovery ward, the place where soldiers went after the acute phase of treatment was over, but before they were well enough to go anywhere else. It had 12 rooms, a nurse's station at the center of the corridor, a small family waiting room at one end, and a supply room at the other. At 11:47 p.m., there were 8 patients in the ward. Most were asleep. 2 were awake and watching television with the volume low. 1, Danny Webb, room 714, was awake and staring at the ceiling, the way he had been most nights for 3 weeks, unable to sleep, unable to stop thinking about what he had seen. The night nursing staff consisted of 2 people. Charge nurse Angela Fuentes, 44, who had worked this ward for 9 years and had seen enough to not be surprised by much, and a younger nurse named Thomas Breyer, 26, who was still in the phase of his career where everything surprised him. The volunteer aide, Maya Cole, was finishing her second pass of the corridor. She mopped methodically. She had noticed the colonel the moment he stepped off the elevator. She had clocked his rank, his bearing, the way he moved, the time of night, the direction he was heading. She had noted all of it. She kept mopping, because nothing had happened yet. And Maya Cole had learned, in 12 years of doing what she had done, that you do not act on what might happen. You observe, you wait, you let the situation reveal itself. She watched Colonel Hargrove stop at the nurse's station, exchange a few words with Angela Fuentes, words that, from 20 feet away, Maya couldn't hear, but could read by the shift in Angela's posture from professional welcome to something more guarded. She watched Angela nod, the nod of someone who didn't feel they had a choice. She watched Hargrove walk to room 714 and go inside. She kept mopping, but her hands were very still on the handle now, in the way that very still things are still. Not from the absence of energy, but from its total concentration. She was listening. She was waiting. And 12 feet to her left, behind the fire door that opened to the stairwell, 3 men in civilian clothes were waiting too. She had seen them come in 45 minutes before Hargrove. She had noted the way they moved, the way they scanned, the way they stood, not the way civilians stand in a hospital, uncertain and a little lost, but the way trained men stand in a space they are preparing to control. She had put her assessment together in the time it took to push her mop bucket past them. 3 men, military background, the posture, the footwear, the constant low-level environmental scanning, armed, the slight adjustment each one made when they moved, the way one of them kept his right hand within 6 inches of his jacket pocket at all times. They were not here to visit anyone. She had not said anything to the nurses, not yet, because she needed to know what they were here for, and acting before she knew that would create chaos rather than prevent it. So she waited. And Hargrove went into room 714, and the 3 men behind the fire door stayed where they were. And the night buzzed along at the same fluorescent pitch it always did, right up until the moment the lights went out. In room 714, Danny Webb heard the door open and turned his head. He was 22 years old, slight, dark-haired, with a face that still looked young in the way that combat has not yet finished aging. He had a metal halo brace around his head from the orbital fracture, the kind of thing that made it hard to move and harder to ignore. His right eye was still partially swollen shut. He didn't recognize Colonel Hargrove immediately. Then he did, and his expression changed. Not fear, something more specific. The particular expression of a person who has been expecting something difficult and has finally stopped being surprised by its arrival. "Sir," he said, his voice was careful. Hargrove closed the door behind him. He pulled the chair from the corner, set it beside the bed, and sat in it. He did not lean forward. He did not raise his voice. He had long ago learned that authority expressed quietly carries more weight than authority expressed loudly. "How are you feeling, Webb?" "Better, sir, thank you." "Good." A pause. "I'd like to talk to you about your JAG filing." Danny Webb said nothing. "I've reviewed the report," Hargrove continued, "and I understand why you filed it. I want you to know that. What you saw was alarming. I don't dismiss that." A beat. Hargrove's eyes on the young soldier, steady, reading, calculating. "But there are things you couldn't have known from your position in that engagement. Context you weren't given access to. The decision made that day, the one you reported, was not unauthorized. It was the product of an intelligence picture that you didn't have and that I am not in a position to share with you in full." Danny Webb's jaw tightened. "What I am telling you," Hargrove said, his voice dropping slightly, filling the room's corners the way experienced speakers learn to do, "is that the filing you submitted is based on an incomplete understanding of a classified operation. Pursuing it will cause significant damage to people who deserve better, to an institution you swore to serve, and to your own career, which has a great deal of potential that I would hate to see wasted." "Sir?" Webb's voice was flat. "4 people died." "Yes." "Civilians?" "Yes. And they were identified as non-combatants before the order was given." "Webb?" "I was standing right there, sir. I had the binoculars. I gave the report myself. They were civilians, 4 of them, and the order came anyway." Hargrove let the silence sit for a moment. He was very good at silence. "I know what you saw," he said finally, "and I know what it cost you, but I need you to trust that there are people in this institution who have the full picture, and that the full picture is more complex than what you saw through those binoculars." "With respect, sir," Danny Webb said, "I'd need to see that full picture before I recant anything." Another silence. This one had a different quality. "I see," Hargrove said. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Webb for a moment with something that was not anger, something quieter and more deliberate. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said. "I hope by then you'll have thought more carefully about what I've told you." He walked out of room 714. He walked to the nurse's station. He picked up the phone on the desk, not his cell phone, the desk phone, and made a call. He spoke 4 words. He won't recant. Proceed. He hung up. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. Maya Cole had not been mopping for the last 8 minutes. She had moved the bucket to the supply room, closed the door most of the way, and stood just inside the gap with a clear sightline to the nurse's station, the elevator, and the fire door at the far end of the corridor. She heard the 4 words. She saw Hargrove go to the elevator. She watched the fire door at the end of the corridor swing open. The 3 men came through. They moved quickly and quietly, which told her they were professionals. 2 turned toward room 714. 1 went to the nurse's station where Angela Fuentes had just turned to see what was happening. Maya saw the man reach into his jacket. She was already moving. In her head, she was not afraid. Fear was a physiological state she recognized and set aside, the way you set aside a tool you don't need right now. Her heart rate was approximately what it always was. Her breathing was even. What was happening in her mind was something her instructors had once described as architectural thinking, the rapid mapping of a space, of the people in it, of where each threat was and where it was going and what could be done, in sequence, in the next 30 seconds to change the outcome. 3 men, 1 at the nurse's station, moving to prevent communication, 2 heading to room 714. Goal, silence, PFC Danny Webb, in a way that can be explained as a medical event or a confusion. She had 30 seconds before the 2 men reached Webb's room, 20 before the man at the nurse's station secured Nurse Fuentes. She had no weapon. She had a hospital corridor, a supply room, a mop handle, a filing cabinet, 12 feet of linoleum, and 12 years of training. She moved. The man at the nurse's station had made a mistake. His mistake was that he had turned his back on the supply room when he reached for Angela Fuentes, because the supply room was not where the threat was supposed to come from. Maya came out of the supply room fast and low. She covered 12 feet in just over 2 seconds. She did not shout. She did not announce herself. She had learned a long time ago that announcing yourself in a close-quarters situation gives away the one advantage you have, timing. She came in at the man's left side, his weak side, the side away from his gun hand, and hit him in the back of the knee with a precise lateral kick that collapsed the joint and dropped him to the floor. As he went down, she used his forward momentum against him, controlling his fall with both hands on his jacket, and put him face first into the floor with a controlled slam that was enough to disorient without killing. She had his right arm behind his back before he hit the floor. She drove her knee into the back of his shoulder and held the position, applying pressure to the joint at an angle she knew very well. The man had about 2 seconds of fight left in him. "Arm," she said quietly to Angela Fuentes. "Give me your arm." Angela Fuentes, 9 years in this ward, seen enough not to be surprised by much, gave her her arm. Maya used it, along with her own body weight, to secure the man to the floor with a restraint she had used 100 times in 100 different circumstances. She stood. She checked the corridor. The 2 men had reached room 714. She had 20 seconds, maybe 15. Colonel Douglas Hargrove was riding down to the lobby when the elevator stopped on the 3rd floor and a hospital security guard got on. His name was Phil Torres. He had worked at Bethesda for 14 years. He was holding a radio. "Colonel," he said, and his voice was off, the way voices go off when someone has just been told something they're still processing. "We've got reports of an incident on Ward 7. Men with weapons." Hargrove said nothing. Phil Torres looked at him. "Sir, do you know anything about—" "I was just in Ward 7, Hargrove said. "I didn't see anything." He kept his eyes on the elevator doors. Phil Torres clicked his radio and started to call it in. And somewhere upstairs, on the 7th floor, Maya Cole was running toward room 714. The 2 men entered room 714 at 11:59 p.m. They did not turn on the light. Danny Webb was awake. He had been awake since Hargrove left, staring at the ceiling, his jaw set in the expression of a person who has made a decision and is sitting with the weight of it. He heard the door. He turned his head. In the dim light from the corridor, he could see the silhouettes of 2 men, and something about the way they moved told him immediately that these were not nurses, not orderlies, not anyone with a legitimate reason to be in his room at midnight. He tried to sit up. The halo brace made it slow. "Stay down," one of the men said. His voice was flat and professional, which was more frightening than if it had been aggressive. The second man moved to the window, checked the sill, looked out. The first man came to the bedside. "We're going to talk," he said. "About what?" Webb said. His voice was steadier than he expected. "About your memory." And then the door behind them opened and the hallway light came in. And in the hallway light was a woman in green volunteer scrubs and a faded volleyball cap. Both men turned. The first man said, "Get out." Maya Cole did not get out. She stepped into the room. She let the door close behind her. She assessed both men and the time it took for the door to fully swing shut. Positions, distances, dominant hands, weight distribution, how each of them was standing, what each of them would likely do in the next 3 seconds. "He needs a medication check," she said pleasantly, as if neither of them had spoken. She was already walking, not toward the men, not away, but at an angle that would put her between Webb and Man 1 while passing within arm's reach of Man 2. Man 2 grabbed her arm. He was strong, 190 pounds at least, trained. His grip was precise. Not the grab of someone who had never done this before, but the controlled hold of someone who had practiced the motion. She had been waiting for the grab. The moment his hand closed on her arm, she turned into it, not against it, into it, rotating her body the direction he was pulling and accelerating through the motion so that instead of being held, she was suddenly beside him, inside his reach, her elbow traveling a very short distance at a very specific angle into the point just below his sternum. The diaphragm seized. Man 2 folded. Man 1 came off the bed fast and grabbed her from behind, arms around her midsection, lifting. She let herself be lifted. This surprises people every time. The instinct is to fight the lift, to resist it, to keep your feet on the ground, but the ground is only useful if you're using it. If someone has committed their weight and their momentum to taking you off it, the ground becomes theirs. The air becomes yours. She went with the lift and used it, tucking her chin, driving the back of her skull into Man 1's face on the way up, using the impact to break the position of his arms, and coming down with her full weight onto his forward foot. The foot buckled. She spun out of his grip, got behind him, and put him into the wall face first with a controlled forward drive that used his own momentum to do most of the work. He hit the drywall hard enough to leave a mark. She held him there with one arm, using a wrist lock she could maintain with 2 fingers if she needed to, and she was barely breathing hard. From the floor, Man 2 was still trying to get his lungs to work. Danny Webb was sitting up in his bed, halo brace and all, staring at her. "Stay down," she said to Man 2. "You'll be able to breathe in about 40 seconds. To Man 1, she said nothing. She just applied slightly more pressure to the wrist lock to remind him of the geometry of his situation. "Who are you?" Man 1 said. His voice was muffled by the wall. "Volunteer aid," Maya said. The problem was the third man. She had left him secured at the nurse's station. Secured without restraints, using a position hold that would last approximately 4 to 5 minutes before the human body's drive to escape overrode the pain compliance. She had been in this room for 2.5 minutes. She needed to move. "PFC Webb," she said, and her voice was calm and flat in the way that voices have to be when there's no room for anything else. "Can you walk?" He looked at the halo brace. "The brace. Can you walk?" "Yes." "Good. Get up. Go to the door, open it, and walk to the nurse's station. Tell Angela to call security and lock down the ward. Don't stop moving." "What about, I'll be right behind you?" She said it like it was already true. That was the thing about her voice in moments like this. It did not perform confidence. It simply occupied it, the way a room occupies space without effort. Webb swung his legs over the side of the bed. She gave him 4 seconds to get upright, kept Man 1 pressed to the wall, assessed Man 2, still down, breathing slowly returning, and calculated. Third man at the nurse's station, unknown current status. She needed Webb clear of the room before she released Man 1, because the moment she released Man 1, the room would become a problem again. Webb was moving. He had his IV stand in one hand, using it as a crutch, and he was moving faster than she expected from someone with broken ribs and a halo brace. Soldiers, she had learned, find reserves in moments like this that they didn't know they had. He reached the door. He opened it. He stepped into the corridor, and the third man was there. He was not still secured. He had gotten himself off the floor in less than 3 minutes, which told her he had more training than she had initially assessed. He had his hand inside his jacket. She heard Webb say something. She released Man 1, not gently, but in a way that took him off balance forward, and was through the door in the same motion. Third man, 12 feet between her and Webb. He had a gun. It was not drawn yet, but his hand was inside his jacket, which meant it was coming out. She had 12 feet and an IV stand. Webb moved, slow, sideways, away from the man, which was the right instinct. Third man tracked Webb. His eyes left her for 1 second. 1 second is a long time. She was already moving, low and angled, not straight at him. Never straight at someone with a weapon, which is the first rule and the most important one. She came in from the right, from his blind angle, and she was inside the radius of the gun arm before it cleared the jacket. She pinned the weapon arm with her left hand, controlled the wrist, and rotated. The gun, a Glock she registered, compact variant, hit the floor. She let it fall. She did not pick it up. She hit him twice in quick sequence, the first at the floating rib, the second at the jaw, using her elbow and the full rotation of her core. He went into the wall behind him and slid down it. She stood over him. Her heart rate elevated, not spiked, breathing controlled, hands steady. She looked at Danny Webb. He was against the wall, eyes wide, one hand wrapped around the IV stand. She said, "Angela." Angela Fuentes, who had been frozen at the nurse's station for the last 30 seconds, which was entirely understandable, picked up the phone and called security. Then she stared at Maya Cole the way everyone in the room was staring at Maya Cole. Maya bent down, picked up the Glock, cleared it in one practice motion, set it on the nurse's station counter, and picked up a latex glove from the dispenser. Don't touch that, she told Angela about the gun. The police will want it where it is. Who? Angela started. I'll explain in a minute. Maya looked at Webb. Are you all right? Yeah, he said. Then, what are you? She almost smiled, just almost. Volunteer aid, she said again. Colonel Douglas Hargrove was in the lobby when his phone rang. It was the man he had called from the desk phone, the one he had told to proceed. We have a problem, the man said. Hargrove listened. His face, over the course of the next 45 seconds, went through several changes that most people would have found difficult to read. He was a man who had spent 30 years managing his expression the way other men managed their posture, constantly, automatically, without thinking about it. But the last change, the final one, when the man on the phone finished talking, that one got through. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the expression of a person who has just been informed that the room they thought they had completely mapped has a door they never knew about. He looked at the elevator. Phil Torres, the security guard, was on his radio, calling up to Ward 7, listening to a voice say something that made him look at Hargrove with new eyes. Sir, Torres said slowly, they're saying someone, a volunteer, took down all three of them, by herself, with her hands. Hargrove said nothing. Sir, they're saying nobody knows who she is. Hargrove was already walking. Not toward the elevator. Toward the exit. Maya Cole sat on the floor of the corridor with her back against the wall and waited for the security team. It took 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes, she did 4 things. First, she checked on the 3 men. All 3 were conscious, none were in danger of dying, and all 3 were going to have a very long night, followed by a very long legal process. She used lengths of medical tubing from the supply cart to secure Man 1 and Man 3. Man 2, who had recovered his breath, she left sitting against the wall and told him not to move. He didn't move. Second, she checked on every patient in the ward, all 8 rooms, moving quickly and quietly. Most had slept through it. The 2 who had been watching television had heard something but stayed in their rooms, which was the right thing to do. She told them everything was fine, and they believed her, the way people always believed her when she said things in that particular voice. Third, she sat down with Danny Webb on the chairs outside his room. He was still in his hospital gown, halo brace and all, and said, Are you hurt? No? Your ribs? Hurts. Was hurting before. Okay. A pause. They came because of my report, he said, not a question. Probably, she said. Another pause. You were listening, he said. Outside the door, when the colonel was in there. I was in the corridor, she said. You heard what he said. I heard some of it. Webb looked at his hands. What do I do? She thought about that for a moment. You already know what to do, she said. You filed 3 reports. You sent a copy to JAG. You did all of that before tonight. Yeah. So you know what to do. He nodded slowly. Yeah. She said, the people who sent those men tonight just became the best argument you have. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. Through the pain and the exhaustion and the shock of the last 20 minutes. And saw something that steadied him. Fourth, she called no one. She sent no messages. She sat with her back against the wall and waited for the security team to arrive, the way she had once waited for extraction teams, in places much darker than this corridor, and she felt something that was not quite peace, but was adjacent to it. She had done what needed doing. That was enough. 7 members of the Bethesda security staff came through the stairwell door at 12:23 a.m., followed by 2 DC Metro police officers who had been on a call nearby. They found 3 incapacitated men in the corridor, secured with medical tubing, a Glock on the nurse's station counter, cleared and covered by a latex glove, a PFC and a halo brace sitting calmly in a chair, a charge nurse who had already written 3 pages of notes by hand, and a small woman in green volunteer scrubs sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, who looked up when they arrived, stood up without particular hurry, and said, I'm Maya Cole. I'm a volunteer aide in this ward. I can walk you through everything. One of the police officers, Officer Luis Ferreira, 12 years on the force, looked at the 3 men on the floor, looked at her, looked at the men again. You did this? He said. Yes. By yourself? Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, what branch did you serve in? Army, she said. What did you do in the Army? Logistics, she said. Luis Ferreira looked at the 3 men on the floor one more time. Uh-huh, he said. Colonel Douglas Hargrove made it to the lobby exit door. He pushed it open and stood in the night air, cold, clear, October cold, and stood there for a long time. He had his phone in his hand. He had calls he could make, people he could reach in the next 20 minutes who could begin the process of containing this, of building the narrative, of turning what had happened into something manageable. He had done it before. He stood in the cold and thought about the 22-year-old in the halo brace upstairs, who had looked at him with eyes that weren't angry, just tired in a particular way, a way Hargrove recognized, because he had seen it in the mirror more than once in the last few years, and had always managed to look away before he had to acknowledge what it meant. He stood there for 4 minutes and 32 seconds. Then he put his phone in his pocket. He turned around. He walked back through the lobby door. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the 7th floor, and rode up. When the doors opened, he stepped off to find a corridor full of police officers, security staff, and the 3 men he had brought, now restrained, now very cooperative. And at the center of all of it, a small woman in green scrubs, giving a calm, detailed account of the last 40 minutes to Officer Ferreira. She saw him when he stepped off the elevator. She stopped talking mid-sentence. She and Hargrove looked at each other across the corridor. He said nothing. He walked toward Officer Ferreira, and when he reached him, he said, "My name is Colonel Douglas Hargrove. I am responsible for the men who entered this ward tonight. I made a call at approximately 11:55 p.m. authorizing their entry and their actions. I will make a full statement." Ferreira looked at him. Then he looked at Maya Cole. "That's what I thought," Ferreira said. He read Hargrove his rights. Hargrove listened to all of them. He did not look away. He did not reach for his phone. He looked across the corridor at Danny Webb in his chair, and Webb looked back at him, and there was something in that exchange that had no clean name. Not forgiveness, not resolution, something earlier and less defined, the beginning of what might years from now become those things. Maybe. The senior hospital administrator arrived at 1:15 a.m. His name was Director William Cates, and he had been woken up by a phone call that had required 3 attempts to fully understand, because what the caller was describing did not make sense on first, second, or third hearing. He walked through Ward 7. He looked at the situation. He talked to Officer Ferreira. He read the initial report. He looked at the volunteer aid badge on Maya Cole's lanyard. Then he pulled up the volunteer file on his phone. Maya Cole, it said, age 38, background check, clear, emergency contact, blank, previous service, U.S. Army, 12 years, logistics. "Miss Cole," he said. He was a careful man. He chose his words carefully. "I'd like to ask you a few questions about your background." "Sure," she said. "The Army," he said. "You listed your specialty as logistics." "Yes." "And yet what you did tonight?" "Director Cates," she said, and her voice was pleasant. "I'm happy to answer your questions, but those men put a soldier under duress and brought weapons into a medical facility. That's the thing I'd focus on right now." Cates blinked. Then he nodded. "Yes, of course." He made several calls. One of those calls reached a brigadier general named Francis Okoro, who was the deputy commander of Army Special Operations Command, and who was awake when the call came because she rarely wasn't. Cates described the situation. He described the woman. He gave her name. There was a long silence. Then General Okoro said, "Is she all right?" Cates blinked again. Yes, she seems fine." "Good," said General Okoro. "Don't let her leave, and do not, under any circumstances, give her a hard time." "Ma'am, I just need to understand who—" "Mr. Cates," said General Okoro, and her voice had the quality of a person who has not needed to explain herself in a very long time. "The woman in your hospital tonight has a file that I can give you very limited information about. What I can tell you is that the 3 men she handled were professionals, and the fact that all 3 of them are breathing and talking is not a limitation of her capability. It's a reflection of her judgment." The call ended. Cates put down his phone. He looked across the ward at Maya Cole, who was sitting on the edge of the nurse's station counter, drinking a cup of coffee that Angela Fuentes had made her, and talking to Officer Ferreira in a quiet, methodical voice, giving her account with the same pace and completeness she brought to everything. "I'll be damned," Cates said, to no one in particular. At 2:30 a.m., after the statements had been given, and the men had been taken into custody, and the police had secured the scene, and the ward had settled back into its fluorescent hum, Danny Webb was back in room 714. Maya knocked on the open door. "You should sleep," she said. Yeah, he didn't look like he was going to. She came in and sat in the chair, the same chair Hargrove had sat in an hour and a half ago, which neither of them mentioned. "Are you going to tell me who you really are?" Webb asked. "I did," she said. "Army, logistics." "Right." He looked at the ceiling. "I'm going to send the report through again, the full account. I'm going to see it all the way." "Good. It might not go anywhere." "Might not. People like Hargrove have—" "Hargrove is downstairs making a statement right now," she said. "Whatever he had, he's giving it up." Webb absorbed that. Why did he come back? She thought about it. Because some things are heavy enough that you put them down, eventually. Even when putting them down means losing everything else. A long pause. "Those 4 people," Webb said, "in Kandahar, they had families." "Yes. I kept thinking after that if nobody says anything, then it's like they never, like it just gets filed away somewhere and nobody ever—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "I couldn't do that." "I know," she said. "Is it worth it? The career, the—" "What do you think?" she said. And she didn't say it the way people say it when they already have an answer they want you to arrive at. She said it the way she said everything, like the question was real, and the answer would be his. He thought about it. "Yeah," he said, "it's worth it." She nodded. "Get some sleep," she said. She stood up and walked to the door. "Hey," he said. She turned. "Thank you." She looked at him for a moment. You held position, she said. You filed those reports 3 times. I just did my job. She left. Bethesda Military Medical Center looked very different in the morning. There were additional vehicles in the parking lot. 3 of them were unmarked, which meant something to people who knew what it meant. There were people in the building who had not been there before, people with quiet postures and clear eyes, and the particular stillness of individuals who make their living assessing situations. One of them found Maya Cole at 7:12 a.m. in the volunteer break room, where she was making her second cup of coffee and writing her incident report in a notebook with the same neat, small handwriting she used for everything. His name was Special Agent Marcus Holt. He was from the Army Criminal Investigation Division, and he had been handed Maya Cole's partial file at 5:30 that morning and had spent the drive to Bethesda reading it, or reading the portions of it he had clearance for, which were limited but sufficient. He sat down across from her. "Miss Cole," he said. "Agent Holt," she said. She had clocked his ID when he walked in. "You've had a long night." "Little bit." He put a folder on the table. He did not open it. "I want to ask you some questions about your background and training," he said, "for the incident report." "Sure." "Your Army record lists your specialty as 92A logistics." "Correct. And yet the 3 individuals you restrained last night, 2 of whom have prior special operations training, were restrained without a single significant injury in a 12-foot corridor in under 2 minutes by someone listed as a logistics specialist." "I stayed physically active after separation," she said. Holt looked at her. He had a quality of gaze that was probably very effective in interrogations. It didn't appear to be working right now. "Miss Cole," he said, "I've read as much of your file as I'm authorized to read. I know there's more than I'm seeing." She said nothing. "I'm not trying to create problems for you," he said. "I'm trying to understand exactly what happened last night so I can document it accurately, because what you did potentially saved the life of a protected witness and preserved evidence in a significant criminal matter." She looked at him. "My file is classified." "Yes. At a level above your clearance, I'm guessing." "Correct." "Then I don't know what I can add." Holt sat back. He tapped the folder once with one finger, thinking. "Let me ask you something different," he said. "Why are you here? Not last night specifically. Why are you volunteering in this hospital?" She was quiet for a moment. "I'm good at being around people who are recovering," she said. "I've been in places where people were hurt, and I know what it takes to come back from that. I don't need to explain it. I just need to be there. And the combat training is a part of my history that I don't go looking for opportunities to use." Holt considered that. "Last night," he said, "when you assessed those 3 men, you knew what they were before they did anything." "I noted their posture and behavior, yes. And you made a choice not to alert staff until you had more information." "Yes." "Why?" She thought about how to answer that. "Because premature action creates panic, and panic kills people in hospitals. I needed to know what they were there to do before I could stop it effectively." Holt nodded slowly. This was the answer of someone who had operated in high-stakes environments and understood the tactical value of information. It was not the answer of a logistics specialist. He picked up his folder. He stood. "I'm going to request an additional clearance review," he said, "for the purposes of the report." "That's your call," she said. "The 3 men are cooperating fully," he said. "Hargrove's statement corroborates everything you described. Webb's testimony about the coercion attempt will be central to the case against Hargrove and the officers named in his filing." "Good," she said. "What you did last night," he said, "was significant." "PFC Webb did something more significant," she said. "He filed that report 3 times. That takes a different kind of courage than what I did." Holt stood at the door for a moment. "Does it?" "Yes," she said. "What I did was fast and physical. What he did, knowing it might end his career, knowing people were going to come for him, he did that every day for 3 months. That's harder." Holt left. Maya finished her coffee. At 10:15 a.m., General Francis Okoro arrived at Bethesda Military Medical Center in a vehicle with no markings. She was 60 years old, trim, with short natural hair, and the posture of a person who had never in her life needed to take up more space than she occupied, because she occupied space the way mountains occupy space, not by expanding into it, but by being exactly what they are. She had known Maya Cole for 12 years. She had been the program director when Maya was recruited. She had written 2 of the most complex evaluation reports of her career about this particular soldier. She had been at the memorial for PFC Jacob Reyes. She found Maya in the volunteer break room, still there, still with coffee. "Maya," she said. "General," said Maya. Okoro sat down across from her. She did not have a folder. She did not need one. "I'm told it was a significant night," Okoro said. "Manageable. 3 operators, no weapons, corridor engagement." "They were good," Maya said. "Not exceptional." A pause. "Are you all right?" Maya thought about it genuinely before answering, the way she always did with Okoro, who had taught her that the question always deserved a real answer. "Yes," she said. "I'm okay." "What are you going to do now?" Maya looked at her coffee. "Come back tomorrow. Help with the morning rounds. There's a patient in 702 who's been having a rough time with the nights. I told him I'd sit with him this week." "Maya." "Ma'am?" "You can't. Just stay here forever, mopping floors? I'm not just mopping floors, Maya said. Okoro looked at her. There was something in the look that was not quite argument. It was something more patient than that, and more complicated. What you did for that soldier last night, she said. Webb? He did it for himself. He almost didn't make it to the chance to do it, Okoro said. Because of what you did, he gets that chance. Maya said nothing. There are people who need what you have, Okoro said. Not the combat training, the judgment, the ability to be present in something impossible and think clearly. I'm present here. I know. A long silence. I'm not asking you to come back, Okoro said. I'm asking you to consider what you want to do. Not what you're running from. What you want. Maya was quiet for a while. I want this, she said finally. This ward, these patients, the person in 702 who needs someone to sit with him. Okoro looked at her. Then do that, she said. And what happens with last night? The investigation proceeds. Webb's testimony proceeds. Hargrove will face a court-martial. Okoro paused. Your file will remain classified. Your name in the report will be listed as a civilian witness. Nobody will look too closely at the inconsistencies. You're covering for me. I'm ensuring operational security, Okoro said with just the edge of a smile. It's different. Maya did smile then, just slightly. Of course it is, ma'am. In a holding room on the second floor of the building, Colonel Douglas Hargrove was waiting for his lawyer. He had made his statement. He had given the names he needed to give. He had done it calmly, in complete sentences, without equivocation, the same way he had done everything in his career, because some habits run deeper than strategy. He was thinking about the woman in the corridor. He kept coming back to her, the way she had moved, the economy of it. Not showy, not aggressive, nothing wasted. He had spent 30 years around people who trained to fight, and he knew the difference between technique and mastery, and what he had glimpsed in that hallway was mastery of a type he had encountered maybe twice before in his entire career. He was thinking about what he had not known. He had looked at her and made his decision in less than a second. Nobody. A volunteer. Invisible. He had been wrong in a way that was not about capability. His capability was not really in question in this room. Not that way. He had been wrong in a way that was about seeing. He had not seen her because he had not looked. He had not looked because he had decided in the fraction of a second before looking that there was nothing to see. He had done that. He had. Not to her specifically. To everything that did not fit the category of threat his brain had been trained over 30 years to recognize. He sat with that. His lawyer arrived. She was efficient and professional and began immediately to work through the legal terrain. Hargrove answered her questions. But what he kept seeing between question and answer was the hallway, the mop, the faded volleyball cap. The woman who had been right there, in plain sight, and whom he had looked at and not seen at all. He thought, I was wrong about her. Then, what else have I been wrong about? It was not a comfortable thought. It was, he acknowledged, an important one. The next morning was a Tuesday. Ward 7 looked the way it always looked. Fluorescent lights, linoleum, the low hum of medical equipment, and human routine. The marks on the hallway wall had been patched. The nurse's station was staffed. The supply room door was closed. Maya Cole arrived at 7:02 a.m. She signed in at the volunteer desk, picked up her assignment sheet, and started rounds. Room 702 first. The patient there was a sergeant named Carl Bowman, 41, recovering from a spinal injury sustained in a vehicle accident during a training exercise. He had 3 months ahead of him in this ward, and a complicated road after that, and he had been having bad nights, the kind of nights where the injury and the future and the specific shape of everything you'd been counting on and no longer could count on all arrived at once, usually around 3 a.m. She knocked. Yeah, he said. She came in. She sat in the chair by the window. How was last night, she said. Bad, he said, about what you'd expect. Okay. She sat with him. They talked a little and were quiet a lot. Outside the window, the October morning was coming up gray and clean. Somewhere in the hospital, the ordinary sounds of morning went on. Carts in corridors, distant voices, the rhythm of a place that keeps moving regardless of what happens. At some point, Bowman said, I heard something happened last night, in this ward. Little bit, she said. They said a volunteer took down 3 guys by herself. She said nothing. He looked at her. Oh, he said. A pause. You okay? He said. She almost laughed. In the middle of all of it, Carl Bowman in his hospital bed asking if she was okay. Yeah, she said. I'm okay. Good, he said. And then, after a moment, can you come back tonight? Around 3? It's worse at 3. Yeah, she said. I'll be here. 3 weeks later, PFC Danny Webb was discharged from Bethesda Military Medical Center. He walked out on his own. The halo brace was gone. His ribs were healing well. He looked younger than he had in room 714 that night. Or maybe just more like himself. More like the person he'd been before Kandahar. Maya was at the volunteer desk when he came through the lobby. He stopped. You're still here, he said. I'm still here, she said. He stood there for a moment, jacket over one arm, duffel bag in the other hand. The report, he said. JAG officially opened the formal investigation last week. I heard. It's going forward, all the way. Good, she said. He shifted the duffel. He looked at her in that direct, slightly lost way that young soldiers look at things that have rearranged their understanding of the world. I don't know what to do with you, he said. You know? Like I don't know how to categorize this. You don't have to, she said. You were just there, mopping the floor. I was there, she said. You were already fighting. I almost quit, he said. 3 times. I drafted it, the withdrawal. I almost sent it. But you didn't. No? He looked at his hands. Why didn't you tell anyone about those guys? When you first noticed them, you could have called security the minute they came in. She thought about it. Because if I had, they would have left, she said. They would have come back another time, a different way, and you wouldn't have known they were coming. This way, there's a record. There are names. There's a case. He absorbed that, the deliberateness of it, the patience. You let it develop, he said, so you could stop it properly. Yes. He nodded. He picked up his duffel. Thank you, he said, again. You're going to be fine, she said. He walked out through the glass doors into the October morning. She watched him go. She thought about Jacob Reyes. She did, for just a moment. The way she always did when she watched a young soldier walk toward something difficult, and chose, anyway, to keep walking. The way Jacob had kept walking. The way Webb was keeping walking now. The thought was not happy, and it was not sad. It was the weight of something true, and she had learned to carry it without being bent by it. She picked up her assignment sheet. She started her rounds. 3 months after the night of October 14th, charge nurse Angela Fuentes was at dinner with her daughter, who was 19 and in her first year of college, and going through the particular struggle of trying to figure out what kind of person she wanted to be. She was asking her mother about the hospital, the things she'd seen, the experiences that had shaped her, and Angela told her about the night of the 14th. She had told it before, to her husband, to her closest friends. She told it again now. She told it the right way, which meant she started with the moment the lights went out and the man came through the fire door, and she described the fear. She was honest about the fear, because that was part of the story, and maybe the most important part. She was afraid. She was really, genuinely afraid. And then she described Maya Cole. She described the sound of her coming out of the supply room. The way she moved. Not like anything Angela had seen before. Not like a fight the way you picture a fight. Not like the movies, but like a person solving a very specific problem very quickly, with everything available. Like someone who had thought through all the possible situations before any of them happened, and was now simply executing. And she described, this was the part she always ended on, the moment after, when it was over, and Maya had picked up the gun with a latex glove and set it on the counter and turned to Angela and said, in the most normal voice imaginable, "Don't touch that, the police will want it where it is." And then she'd asked if Angela was okay. That's the part, Angela said to her daughter. That's the part I keep thinking about. She'd just done that, all of that. And the first thing she asked was whether I was okay. What did you say? Her daughter asked. I said yes, and she said good, like it was already behind her, like she was already thinking about the next thing. Her daughter was quiet. What's she doing now? She asked. Still volunteering, same ward, 6 days a week. After all that, she just stays? Angela thought about it. I asked her once, she said, why she keeps coming back. She said she's good at being with people when they're going through something hard, and she said, Angela paused, getting it right. She said she spent a long time going toward trouble. This is the first place where she gets to stay while people come out the other side of it. Her daughter was quiet again. What was her name? She asked. Maya. Is she? Her daughter hesitated. Is she happy? Angela thought about this carefully. About the woman she had seen on 100 ordinary mornings, making coffee, updating charts, sitting with the difficult patients in the dark hours, moving through the ward with that quality of absolute steadiness. I think, Angela said slowly, that she's found something that fits. And I think that for some people, that's better than happy. Her daughter nodded. She didn't say anything for a while. And then she said, I want to be like that, someday. I want to have that thing where you walk into a situation and you just know what to do. Angela smiled. It doesn't come from nowhere, she said. That kind of knowing, it comes from a lot of hard things, a lot of things you wouldn't choose if you knew they were coming. But it's worth it? Angela thought about Maya Cole mopping a hospital floor in the middle of the night, thought about the way those calm brown eyes had looked at 3 armed professionals and had not shown fear. Not because fear wasn't there, but because it had nowhere to go in the face of something more important. Yeah, she said, from what I've seen, it's worth it. Maya Cole's routine did not change after October 14th. She arrived at 7. She did rounds. She sat with the patients who needed someone to sit with them. She helped Angela with the charts in the late afternoon. She mopped the corridor at 11 p.m. before the end of her volunteer shift, because that was when it needed to be done. She did not tell anyone what she had done. She did not accept the interview request that came from a reporter who had heard a version of the story from a police source. She did not respond to the voicemail from a morning news program. General Okoro called her once more, 2 months after the incident, to tell her that the courts-martial of Colonel Hargrove and 2 other officers were proceeding, that the 4 families in Kandahar whose names were in Danny Webb's report had been formally notified by the army, that there would be no public acknowledgement of what Maya had done at Bethesda at her request, and that her file would remain sealed. "Is that what you want?" Okoro asked. "Yes," she said. "Okay." A pause. "I'd like to send you something," Okoro said. "It'll arrive tomorrow. You don't have to do anything with it. You can put it in a drawer." "What is it?" "It's from General Whitmore, Office of Special Operations. He asked me to convey his personal thanks for what you did." "He doesn't need to." "He wanted to." "Okay." Maya, a long pause. "I'm proud of you." She sat with that for a moment. "Thank you, ma'am." She went back to work. The package arrived the next day. It was a small, flat box. Inside was a card with Whitmore's signature and 4 words. Asterisk, you saved them both. Below the card was a challenge coin, not one she recognized. A special design, not from any unit she'd officially served in. On one side, an insignia she knew from her own file. On the other side, 3 words in small engraved letters. She held it for a moment. She put it in her pocket, where it would stay for the next several years, through several hundred more shifts in several different wards. A weight she could close her fingers around on the hard nights. A reminder that was not really about what she had done on October 14th, but about what she had chosen, every day since, to keep doing. It was 3:15 a.m., a Thursday. Ward 7 was quiet in the way wards are quiet at 3 a.m. Not silent, never silent, but muted. The fluorescent lights holding steady in their low hum. The machines maintaining their rhythms. The night folded around everything like something patient and unbothered. Carl Bowman was awake. He was always awake at this hour. 3 months in, the nights were better than they had been, but not entirely gone. He still woke at the hour when the injury and the future and everything that had been rearranged arrived to sit with him. At 3:20, there was a knock on the door of room 702. "Yeah," he said. Maya Cole came in. She sat in the chair by the window. She had a cup of coffee. She'd learned by now that he didn't want tea and didn't want to talk about feelings and didn't want anyone to do the thing where they leaned forward with a concerned expression and said things like, "Asterisk, tell me how you're feeling, asterisk." He just wanted someone there. She was there. Outside the window, the October city was dark and lit up at the same time in the way cities are dark and lit up at 3 a.m. A sky that was not quite black, a ground-level glow from street lamps and distant traffic, something in between darkness and morning, neither one thing nor the other. "You think it gets better?" Bowman said after a while. She didn't answer right away. She thought about it. "Yes," she said. "How do you know?" "Because I've been in worse places at worse hours than this," she said, "and I'm here." He thought about that. "That's not a very comforting answer," he said. "No," she said, "but it's true." He almost smiled. "Fair enough." They sat in the quiet for a while. The 3 a.m. quiet, the one that is harder than most, but also, when you are not alone in it, not impossible. Outside, the city held its breath the way cities hold their breath between the worst of the night and the beginning of the morning. Inside, the lights held steady. And Maya Cole sat with someone who needed someone to sit with him, which is a kind of strength that doesn't appear in any file, classified or otherwise, but which is, when you have been in enough dark places to know, the most necessary kind there is.